Ah, the sizzle of McDonald's sausage. It's enough to make you crave your favorite breakfasts. Enough to head over to McDonald's. Enough to make you really wish this commercial were scratch and sniff.
And if you're a sausage person, now get 2 satisfyingly savory sausage McGriddles, sausage biscuits, or sausage burritos for just $3.33. Or mix and match. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer or combo meal. Single item at regular price.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. A little over a year ago, my nerves were ringing when I walked into the Holistic Fair. Whether from the intense energy that comes from a gathering of so many tuned-in souls, or from a premonition about what I was going to hear or see, or because I just sold almost everything I owned to move to South America in pursuit of a new relationship, I can't say. Likely a mixture of all of it. Wandering among the various booths, I'd heard over and over about the incredibly talented palm reader that I just had to see. The long line at the front of his booth kept me wondering, but I took one last glance just as I was about to leave, and there was no one waiting. Well, might as well, I thought. He smelled of cigarettes and coffee, and his face hinted at a life intensely lived, or lots of time spent in the sun. As his gnarled fingers traced the lines in my hand, he gave a grunt of surprise before looking up at me and stating bluntly, "You're unlucky in love." You think? Over 40 years old and single, planning to move to another continent in order to give it a go one more time? Yeah, I think we could safely say that. "This isn't the guy," he told me in the next breath. My heart sank. "So you're saying I shouldn't have just moved out of a house I loved and coordinated a 4-day road trip to get my dog and I to South America?" He mentioned some other things about my career. Apparently people with my hands are great at real estate. I do love houses and design, but I wasn't quite ready to let go of the nearly 20 years I'd invested in making a career as a writer. He offered some other thoughts too, but my mind was still reeling from the emotional sucker punch he'd landed on me a few moments prior. "I mean, your life is in your hands," he said. "Do what you want. Just keep your passport close." I did, of course, move to South America to be with a man, and as you might know, that relationship did not end up being the dream I thought it might be. I'm still here, though, and loving my life in this third world country more and more with every passing week. When the proverbial shit hit the fan and I made the decision to leave the Colombian, I immediately thought back to the palm reader, and upon closer inspection, he was right. Not just about the inevitable demise of the relationship that I was in at the time, but about my relationship with love in general. I'd always just kind of written off my failed relationships as natural, processes of life and love and growing and being human. And they were those things, they are those things, but they've also been intense. The relationships and the breakups. I had a baby with one guy that I gave up for adoption. I married another guy only to end up broke and homeless. The third long-term relationship ended after we were in a motorcycle accident that left me on the other side of the veil for a few days. The fourth guy I was sure was the love of my life, but that one ended too, because love, as we know, isn't enough. All that before the Colombian. Perhaps there's a message I've been missing in all of this? A few days ago, an old realization came back to hit me full in the face. Perhaps part of the reason I've had such bad luck in relationships is that I've been giving too much of myself. That awareness touched me first just after the accident, and I really got the logistics of the message in the last serious relationship before the Colombian. I learned so much about how to make myself happy instead of trying to teach him how to make me happy. I began to live more and more on my own terms, even in the context of the relationship, though eventually that led to the end of the relationship. And I feel like I successfully carried those lessons into the relationship with the Colombian. However, with the blessing of hindsight, I can now see that while I didn't depend on the wild man for my happiness, and fiercely held to following what I needed to make myself happy, I still invested everything else in a theoretic future with him. Terrestrial things like my money and other resources, yes, but more pointedly, the way I saw myself, the way I dreamed about my future. The surprising awareness I came to the other day is that in an effort to secure this way of believing about myself and the future I dreamed of for us, I also began to give his needs and desires more priority. Just a few of them here and there. I wanted him to be happy in the relationship too, of course, and in order to give him what I understood he wanted, I began adjusting myself, just a little bit, twisting and contorting my wants and needs to find a way to align them with his. I've always known I was a people pleaser, but I think I kind of carried around the idea that it wasn't such a bad thing in the context of romantic relationships. Like, that's what you're supposed to do, right? To a degree, I would still answer that question with a resounding yes. Of course, it's important to consider your partner's happiness in the relationship. Compromise is essential in order to have successful relationships. But I think there's a balance that's necessary there, and one I blew right off the scales. Negotiating where to have dinner because I want salad and he wants fried animal, yes. Accepting the meat from his fork shoved in my mouth after I'd said over and over I didn't want any, no. The delicate nuance of this balance was, I realized, particularly apparent in the bedroom. I recently discovered that I haven't just been a people pleaser all my life, I've been a penis pleaser. Many of the men in my life have been big fans of morning sex, which I can completely understand. Often they wake up halfway to the finish line. I, however, don't love morning sex. My breath is terrible. I'm a person that needs a little while to wake up. My body is dry as the Sahara. And when it happens, as soon as it's over, I just want to go back to sleep. Except that now I'm probably 15 minutes behind schedule, at least. But I almost never said no when they wanted it. Instead, I chugged a bottle of water, sprinted alongside their train, which had begun pulling out of the station while they were still asleep, and jumped on board just as the whistle blew. Which is fine. I want them to get what they want, and I don't want to be the romantic version of a cold shower every morning. Except that there are times when train hopping just isn't feasible. When I was young, I used to let boyfriends know that the full moon had arrived for me by telling them that it was blowjob week. Except I don't love giving blowjobs either. I sound like such a prude, don't I? It isn't the concept of the activity that bothers me, it's the logistics. I don't have a large mouth. I'm always terrified I'm going to scrape or bite them. There's no chance of a train whistle moment for me. Plus, it takes forever because I'm terrible at it. And this time I'm not being self-deprecating. So I tried to learn to be good with my hands instead. I Googled videos, but never really got anything other than poorly made X-rated websites. I tried to ask boyfriends, but they only really guided me with the ever helpful, just, up and down. Well, yeah, I know what this activity is, but I'm not a metal rod and piston. It's hard for me to keep the pace and angle constant enough to give them a wonderful experience. I mean, the whistle blows, but I think they're working harder than they'd like to be. But I did it all anyway, because even though my body was out of commission for the delights of physical intimacy, didn't mean they had to miss out too. But doesn't it? Kind of? If I can get it up for morning sex on occasion, they can get themselves by for 4 or 5 out of 30 days, right? I realized recently that for, nearly all of my adult life in relationships with men, I've sacrificed what I really wanted in favor of what they really wanted. In the bedroom. Inconvenient sex, yes, but also uncomfortable sex, painful sex. So often I surrendered to the pressure of the desire that had inflated their penis that not only did I not get to blow my whistle, but I fucking hurt trying to help them blow theirs. Sometimes for days. There are innumerable reasons I did this, I'm sure, but in exploring the idea, I realized a lot of it was conditioning. When I was maybe 15 years old, I somehow ended up with plans to go to the local professional basketball game with the popular girls. An anomaly in and of itself. I was certainly not a popular girl, nor was I top on their list of girls to hang out with. But however it happened, and hours before the game, we all gathered at Amy the hot girl's house to participate in the teenage girls going out ritual. At the time, the extent of my getting ready routine for any kind of event ever was putting on my favorite ski equipment brand t-shirt and jeans. Hot girl Amy, bless her beautiful heart, tenderly disapproved and set about making me into a hot girl. An hour of makeup, half a can of Aquanet hairspray, and a borrowed crop top later, the gaggle of us waltzed into the massive arena and took our seats just down from a line of the hottest boys in school. "Who's the new girl?" I heard them asking one another as we passed. I glanced around in front of me to see if someone else had joined our little train. And then Brett, the hottest of them all, ran up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder. I spun around to face him, and when his eyes rested on mine, his face flushed a deep shade of magenta, and he said, "Holy shit, Jackie?" I grinned and giggled, and for the next couple of hours indulged in what I now realize were 15-year-old boy flirtations. By the time our team won, he and I were going out, boyfriend and girlfriend. Every time I thought about it for the rest of the weekend, I grinned from ear to ear. Which made it all the more devastating when he broke up with me on Monday, after essentially asking me why I'd gone back to my jeans and t-shirt uniform. I wasn't devastated, per se. I was too emotionally immature to even feel anything deeply for him. Besides, we'd done little more than hold hands. But I did subconsciously carry that narrative forward, gleaning that because I wasn't naturally gorgeous, nor willing to spend hours on my hair and nails and perfect body sculpting workout routines, I'd better give whoever happened to like me whatever he wanted. And as I got older, it seemed that message was reiterated over and over. It also seemed to me that based on what I saw in TV and movies and stand-up comedy routines, straight men did not actually want to be in relationships. It appeared more as though they started sleeping with someone they liked and then woke up one morning shocked to find that they actually lived with a woman because there are tampons in the medicine cabinet. Okay, so men really only stay in relationships for sex. They don't actually want the relationship, they just want to keep having the comfortable sex and enjoying the fact that they always have clean underwear. Got it. The underlying message I extracted was that if straight women want to keep the men in our lives, we better keep them happy, and we all know what makes men happy, right? In truth, though, it isn't the media's fault. In fact, I've long admired the narrative that's told alongside the version I just presented, in which women say, yeah, not happening, and roll over. Not because I like the idea that she's somehow withholding sex from her partner. Which reminds me, I want to take this opportunity to say that I hate the idea of weaponizing sex. I hate the idea of using it as a bargaining tool or a reward and punishment system. The thing is, I don't think it is that, at least not as much of the time as it's presented that way. Of course, every individual has different wants and needs and desires, and that's not going to line up perfectly, which is exactly what I love about the yeah, not happening and rolling over scenario. In my mind, and I assume in the vast majority of cases, this is an empowered female telling her male partner that she's just not into it tonight, without apology or guilt for not being able to give him what he wants. But I digress. Obviously, ultimately, the responsibility for evolving into a penis pleaser lies with me. I believed the story I thought I was being told, that I'm not good enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough, not special enough for a man to want to stay by my side, stay in my life. And so I had to keep him there by making him happy and giving him sex. I mean, nobody told me that. God, can you imagine? Although now that I think about it, there were some how to be a good wife handbooks that laid it out in almost exactly those terms a few decades back. No, the truth is I crafted those ideas all on my own from what I thought I was seeing and hearing about what men didn't want and what women should or shouldn't do in relationships. And eventually I learned the lesson, cerebrally at least. That's the oft overlooked silver lining of having your whole life blow up. It's so much easier to tell the new man in your life that it's not happening and roll over after your most recent ex-boyfriend pressed the liquefy button with your heart in the blender. And of course, because in that moment you, or at least I, had absolutely no interest in submitting to the torture of a relationship again. After I left the Colombian, I doubled down on myself, my growth, my connection with my soul self, my spirituality. Though it quickly became clear that holding that power, that awareness of honoring what's right for me and not placating to the needs of others, is a whole lot easier when there are no others. And it's even easier if there isn't even the whisper of a romantic interest. In time, I realized it was time to test the waters with the new and improved, non-penis-pleasing Jackie out in the real world. And I don't mind admitting to you it didn't go great at the first few at-bats. I had a couple tepid dates with a couple of attractive guys. Maybe my sex drive is just completely shut down, I mused. Then I had a date with a beautiful man, disarmingly beautiful. He had the kind of body you see on the cover of Gorgeous Man magazine. Square jaw, deep eyes, mysterious energy. I'd seen him in the park on a regular basis for months before he finally asked me out. I was shocked. I mean, pleasantly so, but with the familiar tinge of paranoia. Sure, he may have been attracted to me with clothes on, walking my pup in the streams of sunlight that filter through the canopy of trees. But in the harsh artificial light of my apartment, the cellulite on my thighs, the wrinkled skin that sags from my biceps, the sunspots that freckle my face and arms would be unmistakable. To say nothing of the wide swaths of deep scarring that crisscross my legs. And, as my luck and love would have it, I got my period the morning of our scheduled date. He came over anyway. We fooled around. He had fun. I enjoyed being touched. And I found out he's a little younger than I'd thought. Like, by almost a decade. Coupled with the reality that my bed smelled like my dog and I was in no way comfortable in my body, by the time he left, I was sure I wouldn't be seeing him again. Except that of course I would because he works in the park where I walk my dog every day. Ugh, awkward. Refreshingly though, this time, I felt very little insecurity after the fact. He didn't like me. Part of the reason I'd let this particular guy into my house was that we had a connection. A shared interest in non-traditional spirituality and definite chemistry. But I was certain there was no risk of falling in love with him, of having my heart broken. The thing that really bothered me was that I'd let my confidence waver. I'd bought into that old narrative that I'm not good enough for a man that looks like that, even though I know that's bullshit. The next night, though, another pretty boy came over, decidedly less statuesque but incredibly handsome and respectful, and patient and the tiniest bit shy. For hours we delighted in the teasing and tempting of foreplay, making out, tongues in each other's mouths, hands over pants. and I genuinely had a good time. He clearly enjoyed it too, though less so through the fly zipper jeans, and I wanted him to have a good time. So when he pushed the boundary a little further and took it out, I wanted to help him get to the same little cloud that I had. I wanted to help him get to the whistle, except that I didn't want to do it with my hands or with my mouth, obviously. And for a few minutes, I struggled with that. Then I realized I don't have to do that. I don't owe this guy anything. If I'm not actually comfortable with those things, I don't have to do them. I realize I might miss out on other pleasures too, because it's a give and take. But I'm willing to sacrifice that, specifically because this guy is not a long-term partner. He's not even a contender to be a long-term partner, which admittedly makes it easier. But after he came and then left, I felt good about the whole thing. I'd held my confidence and my boundaries, and I got to practice knowing, feeling that I don't have to give so much to men or their penises. I hope you have a wonderful week, and join us next week for another exploration of the weird, random, and wonderful reality of being human. If you liked this podcast, remember to subscribe, and please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Jacqueline Lene. There you'll also get access to the personal stories of the random ways daily life inspires me to keep growing, the deeper, more spiritual ones. And if you'd like to dig in and do some healing through self-love, check out the workshops and personal support sessions available on my website at authorjacquelinelene.com. That's JACLYNLANAE. Thanks for listening.